My family announced my death on Facebook while I was sitting in my recliner eating oatmeal. And the way they wrote it, you'd think they'd been waiting years to lower me into the ground. But seeing they'd even planned a celebration for my passing told me there was only one place I needed to be, right in the center of the room where they never expected a dead man to walk in. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button so this story reaches anyone whose family has ever crossed a line no one should cross. I found out I was gone at 7:14 a.m. My oatmeal wasn't even cold yet. I was scrolling through Facebook on the old tablet my granddaughter bought me 5 Christmases ago. Cracked screen, slow as molasses, just try and see photos from her school play. Instead, the screen was filled with sad emojis, broken hearts, and messages from people I hadn't spoken to in decades. At first, I thought someone else had died, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from church. But then I saw my own name, bold as daylight, sitting right under a picture of me blowing out candles on my 70th birthday. We are heartbroken to share that our beloved father, Frank, passed away peacefully last night. I blinked so hard my glasses slid down my nose. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I clicked on something wrong. Maybe Facebook was glitching again. But no, it was my daughter's account. My own child. She posted a long paragraph about my courage, my battle, my final moments, all written like poetry for an audience she wanted to impress. My hand trembled around the tablet. I felt a sting in my chest, not from the heart, from the gut, that deep, heavy blow you only feel when someone you love betrays you in a way you can't understand yet. My son shared it too. My cousins, my nieces, my church friends. Everyone believed it. There were comments under the post. Hundreds. I'm so sorry for your loss. He was such a good man. Sending prayers for your family. Rest in peace, Frank. Rest in peace? I was sitting right there in my bathrobe, breathing just fine. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled down further. That's when I saw the donation link. GoFundMe. Help us give Dad a beautiful funeral. Goal, $35,000. Raised so far, $9,480. Donors, 137. My stomach twisted so hard I had to steady myself on the armrest. My old bones don't handle shocks well. My fingers tingled. My heart thudded like a drum too big for my chest, and I had to take slow breaths just to keep from passing out. Then I clicked the fundraiser. And there I was again, my picture in black and white, looking like someone had drained the life from it. A dramatic story followed about my final days and hospital visits and medical bills, and how my children were struggling to afford the funeral I deserved. It was a whole script. Detailed. Practice. Sympathetic. I hadn't been in a hospital in 3 years. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the tablet. I pressed the screen again, and my thumb accidentally opened another post, one promoting a celebration of life, event on Saturday at the community hall. They booked a venue. They printed flyers. They invited the whole damn town. For a moment, everything around me faded. The ticking clock, the creak of the old recliner, the sound of my neighbor's dog barking outside. All I could hear was a ringing in my ears and the pounding of my heart. My children, the people I raised, the people I carried when they scraped their knees, the people I stayed up nights for, had buried me online without telling me. Why? Why would they do that? Why pretend I died? My eyes darted across the fundraiser page again, and this time I noticed comments from people I didn't even know saying, donated, happy to help the family. He was a good man. Gone too soon. Gone? I wasn't going anywhere. Then I saw the latest comment, posted just minutes before. So excited to see everyone at the celebration. Let's give Frank the send-off he deserves. My throat closed up. The room felt smaller. My breathing went uneven. A celebration. A fundraiser. My funeral without me. I wiped at my face and realized my eyes were damp. I'm not ashamed of that. At my age, you learn crying is a weakness. It's just truth escaping. I stare at the screen, reading every line, every lie, every fake detail about the sweet, gentle man we lost. I felt numb, dizzy, almost hollow, like they had actually managed to carve something out of me and toss it aside. Then something else happened. Something I didn't expect. A spark, small, quiet, but sharp as a nail, lit inside me. And that spark said, "This isn't just a misunderstanding. This isn't grief. This isn't desperation. Something darker is happening here. Something that started long before this morning. Something they didn't think I would ever discover." My fingers tightened around the tablet. "What would you do?" I whispered into the empty room. "If your own children declared you dead just to make a profit?" I sat there, shaking, heart pounding, trying to steady myself. But that was before I learned why they really needed me to stay dead, and before I walked into a room full of people celebrating my passing, with me standing alive in the doorway watching them all freeze. The rest of that morning passed in a blur. I couldn't tell you what time I finally stood up from the recliner, or how long I just stared at the wall holding that tablet like it was a bomb someone had forgotten to defuse. I remember my hands trembling, my knees aching as I forced myself upright, and the unsettling quiet of the house. Too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. At 74, you don't spring into action. Your body moves first, then your mind catches up a moment later. But every step I took through that living room felt heavier, like I was dragging something behind me, something I didn't ask to carry. I walked to the kitchen and splashed water on my face. The cold stung my skin. For a second, I stared at myself in the small mirror above the sink. This old man with thinning white hair, sagging cheeks, a face carved with years of trying, failing, loving, losing. A man who lived long enough to see his own obituary written by the children he raised. And the strangest thing hit me. I didn't recognize the eyes staring back. There was something harder in them. Something raw. Something awake. When I finally grabbed my coat, I wasn't even sure where I was going. I just knew I couldn't sit in that silent house any longer. The betrayal was too loud inside my head. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. It stung the inside of my nose as I breathed it in. My driveway was littered with dried leaves scraping along the concrete. I walked to my old Buick, slow, careful, legs stiff, and sat behind the wheel. My hands were still shaking. It took me 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. But once the engine started and the heat kicked in, that spark inside me pushed back against the fear. I wasn't going to hide in my house while my children cashed in on my imaginary funeral. I drove to my daughter's place first. Emma lived only 15 minutes away, in a cozy little duplex she'd inherited from my sister. I'd helped her paint the living room the year she moved in. She cried then, happy tears, telling me no one ever helped the way I did. Now she was selling my death for donations. As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed something immediately. Cars. More cars than usual. 5 or 6 of them lined up outside, and one I recognized right away. My son Brian's black SUV. My heart thudded. They were here. All of them. Planning something. I stepped out of the car, grabbing the door frame to steady myself as my knees protested the cold. A crow perched on the fence post turned its head toward me, cawing in a way that felt too symbolic for comfort. I shuffled toward the front door, each step heavy but determined. Through the thin curtains, I saw shadows moving. My children pacing around, talking, organizing. I reached the porch, raised my hand, and knocked. The talking inside stopped abruptly. Feet shuffled. Voices dropped to a whisper. Then the door opened just a crack. Emma stood there, pale as a ghost, her eyes going wide like she'd just seen one. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice cracked in a way that made my stomach twist. Not with remorse. With shock. The kind a thief gets when the owner walks back into the house early. I gave her a stiff nod. "You gonna let me in?" She froze for a moment, breathing unevenly. Then she opened the door wider, and I stepped into her living room. Brian was there. So was my sister's daughter, Grace. And scattered across the coffee table. Flyers. Donation envelopes. Stacks of cash. Laminated posters for the celebration of life. A roll of black ribbon. A framed picture of me next to a battery-operated candle. I stared at the scene. Brian stared at me. Grace stared at the floor. Nobody said a word. The silence wrapped around the room like a cold fog. I inhaled slowly. "Well," I said quietly, "I guess the good news is I'm not dead." Emma swallowed hard. her eyes glistening. Dad, we can explain. Brian shot her a look, sharp warning. His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, forcing a smile that looked painfully glued to his face. Dad, look, it's not what it looks like. I tilted my head. Really? Because it looks like y'all killed me off and threw a fundraiser. That's not, he started. It's exactly what it looks like, I said sharply. Don't lie to me. He flinched. Grace froze, holding a string of ribbon in her hand. She hadn't finished cutting. Emma rubbed her arms nervously. Dad, we didn't expect you to see it yet. I blinked. Yet. Brian cursed under his breath. Emma shot him a panicked glance. I stepped closer, my old joints cracking under the movement. What does that mean? Yet? What else are you planning? Emma bit her lip. Dad, you've been, struggling. My jaw clenched. Struggling. You forget things, she said. You miss appointments. You don't answer calls. We thought it was time. For what? Brian hesitated. Visibly, his eyes darted toward the coffee table. My gaze followed. There was a folder under the pile of flyers. A thick folder. A legal one. I reached toward it. Brian stepped between us. Dad, don't. I narrowed my eyes. Move. He didn't. The tension in the room snapped tight, like a wire. I could feel it in my chest. That old instinct telling me something wasn't right. Something worse than what I'd already seen. I took another step, ignoring the way his face tightened. Move. I repeated, voice low. He finally stepped aside. My fingers shook as I reached for the folder and flipped it open. Guardianship forms. Medical paperwork. Statements claiming I was incapable of living alone. Requests for control of my assets. Signatures. Some real, some forged. My vision blurred. My throat tightened. My hand gripped the folder so hard the paper crinkled beneath my fingers. Emma started crying. Dad, we were trying to help. Help. I whispered, barely getting the word out. Help who? She wiped her eyes. You need someone to take care of things. Brian jumped in. We weren't going to file it without talking to you first. Really? I lifted the folder. You already forged half my medical history. This says I've been bedridden for months. Grace flinched. I turned to her. Did you know about this? She bit her lip. I just helped print things. The truth sank into my chest like a stone. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time lie for sympathy. This wasn't even about donations anymore. They were planning to take everything. My house, my savings, my independence, my dignity. And they were doing it while telling the world I was already gone. My heart pounded. My chest felt tight. And for a terrifying second, I had to grab the armrest of the couch to steady myself. Emma reached toward me instinctively. Brian stopped her. Don't. He'll use it against us. Use it against them. Against them. That was the moment, right there, when the truth hit me like a blow. They didn't see me as their father anymore. They saw me as an obstacle. Something to get rid of. Something in the way. Something more profitable dead than alive. I looked at all three of them. Really looked. And for the first time in my 74 years, I felt like I was alone in a room full of strangers wearing my family's faces. I straightened slowly, ignoring the trembling in my legs. I'm leaving, I said quietly. And trust me, I'm not done. No one moved. No one breathed. I opened the door, stepped outside, and the cold air hit my face like a wake-up call. That's when I realized I couldn't face this alone. I walked the rest of the afternoon in a kind of daze. The neighborhood looked the same, mailboxes leaning, the hydrangeas sagging under the summer heat, but everything felt different. The thin thread that had tied me to my life here had been cut, and with each step my chest ached from the awareness that the people I trusted most had already started spending my future. I knew I needed help, not the kind you get from a clinic or a lawyer. I needed someone with stubbornness in their bones, someone who'd been around long enough to recognize when something smelled rotten that wasn't supposed to, someone nosy, someone fearless, someone like Mrs. Dunbar across the street. Mabel Dunbar was 79, and she kept her lawn so tidy it looked like it might have its own HOA. She knew who watered whose plants, whose dog dug in which yard, and whether a neighbor's porch light had been left on all week. If there was gossip, Mabel had heard it. If there were receipts, Mabel had seen them. If a family was planning something ugly, Mabel would notice the telltale patterns of paper, ink, and hurried phone calls. I went to her side yard and leaned on the gate like a man catching his breath. She squinted up at me, then set her knitting aside. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said. "I might as well have," I answered. She nodded once, short and decisive. "Come in." She didn't wait for me to explain. Mabel always got to the heart of things faster than anyone else. Through the screen door, the house smelled like lemon polish and turkey gravy. Mabel shuffled to the kitchen table and poured herself a cup of coffee, thick and black. She watched me with that steady, unsparing gaze people her age get when they've outlived nonsense. I told her everything. How I'd woken up to my own funeral online, the GoFundMe with thousands pouring in, the flyers, the legal folder with guardianship forms, the receipts for caterers and balloons slapped down before I'd known a thing. I watched her face as I talked, the small movement of her mouth, the tightening under her eyes. She didn't blink like the others did when I said the word forgery. She just poured me more coffee. "Ah," she said finally, and set the mug down with a soft thump. "They booked the hall already, you say?" "Saturday," I said. 3 days? Mabel's eyes narrowed. "They're moving fast. They're moving like people who planned this for a while." I said, "They printed thank you notes already. They've got speeches written. My own daughter wrote that post like a eulogy." She tapped the table with one knuckle. "Let's not guess. Let's find the receipts, the prints, the little things that don't lie." We started small. Mabel insisted on seeing the fundraiser page herself, and when she scrolled through it, she didn't ask for my login. She said she knew tricks for finding digital crumbs, cached screenshots, shared links, the little metadata that often gets missed. She muttered to herself as she worked the tablet like a seasoned detective, and then she breathed out a sound that could have been a curse. "Look here," she pointed. "The organizer's email, linked to a business account. You can set those up in minutes, but the IP traces them back to a public place sometimes." She made a note on a pad with a pencil she chewed the end of. "We'll need copies, screenshots that capture the timestamps, and the GoFundMe updates, those comments. Save them, print them. You can do all that?" I asked, feeling ridiculous at my age asking for this kind of help. "Of course I can," she said. "I raised 6 children and ran a PDA. This is nothing." She called my neighbor, Tom, who ran the library 2 blocks over, and knew a thing or two about computers. Within an hour, I had hard printouts, pages from a fundraiser, the original Facebook post with its header, the timestamps, the list of donors and their comments, a cached preview showing the earliest version of the GoFundMe description. The paper felt shocking in my hands, like evidence from a crime drama my life had somehow wandered into. But it was the small stuff that Mabel fixated on, the things you don't think to fake. A photo of the event poster with a corner slightly bent, a catering receipt with a clerk's handwriting, a delivery invoice with a company stamp and a truck number, a calendar invite sent from a shared email address at 10:12 a.m. the week before. Patterns, threads. We followed them. Mabel's gaze snagged on one particular line, on a receipt from a party supply store. "Look." Her finger landed on a string of numbers. This order was made under a business account that belongs to E. Carter Events. That's a real outfit. You can't just make one up. I know Sylvia over at the supply store. She's been in that business for 25 years. She recognizes her regulars. We drove straight over to Sylvia's. The shop smelled like twist ties and plastic tablecloths, and Sylvia herself was powder pink and fierce. She remembered the order. Of course. Had a note tucked in the ledger. She had the receipt in her hand like a confession. "You know she paid cash?" she said. Came in with a stack of 10s and told me it was for her father's memorial. Said she didn't want anyone knowing it was for donations. Cash. People who want to hide things use cash. People who don't plan to be questioned use cash. We collected other scraps. A voicemail left on the event coordinator's phone. A printed message from Amanda to a caterer asking for budget-friendly platters. A text thread between siblings about ticket prices and who would bring the photo montage. Someone had even printed a mock program with my name and an order of service typed in, suggestions for hymns, and a suggested donation map. $25, $50, $100 tiers. The deeper we dug, the worse it smelled. It wasn't desperation scrambled into a bad idea. It was a carefully built production. They had roles. Someone managed the donations, someone handled the decor, someone handled the PR on social media, someone handled the story. It read like a small operation, efficient and cold. What scares me, Mabel said that evening as we sat at her table with the papers spread like evidence, is how normal it all looks. It's dressed in grief, ribbons, candles, solemn words, so people don't see the scam behind it. You think they'll notice? I asked, my voice low. Not unless we make them, she said. And to make them, we need something they can't deny. I wanted to scream the truth from every rooftop, to drag my family's names through every street and square until the truth stuck to them like mud. But Mabel was practical. She'd seen enough human cruelty to know that public outrage can be messy and that the law likes boxes, documents, prints, clear pieces that fit together. We needed a smoking gun. We'll need a witness, she said. Someone who handles the money. Someone who knows where the donations are going. Or we get them on camera doing something that proves intent. The plan she laid out was simple and brutal in its clarity. We would attend the event. We would go in as guests. Not loud guests. Quiet ones. Sitting in the crowd like two old folks who had no idea what was about to go down. We bring tape recorders. A small legal camera. Mabel swore by that looked like a button, and a notepad. We make small talk with volunteers. Ask where the money was being held. How receipts were handled, who had access to the account. We'd be careful, gentle, and when someone slipped, a flinch, a whisper, a comment, we'd be there to record it. We'd also collect physical evidence, name tags, ticket stubs, donation envelopes. You sure about this? I asked, aren't we walking into a nest of hornets? Hornets are loud, Mabel said. These are quieter. The trick is to be the thing they least expect, tenacious and invisible. We needed one more thing, and Mabel knew exactly who to call. Her nephew, Eddie, a retired postal inspector who'd caught check forgers back in his day. Eddie was the kind of man who loved puzzles. He arrived the next afternoon with a bulky camera bag and a blue windbreaker that smelled slightly of petrol. He looked at the printouts with an amused frown and rubbed his chin. People who organize scams make the same mistakes, he said. They think they're smarter than the system. They reuse emails. They use the same pickup locations. They write checks from easily traced accounts. They get sloppy. Get sloppy, Mabel echoed. Like the receipts our lovely family forgot to hide. Eddie and I compared notes while Mabel called around, arranging for us to have a seat near the front at the celebration. We crafted simple questions about the band, about the photo montage, about where to park, and decided how we'd work the room. We planned our exit routes and signals. The whole operation felt like preparing for a small storm. The next morning, as I folded an old jacket for the event, my hands still trembled with a cocktail of fear and fierce, hard clarity. This was no longer only about exposing a lie. It was about protecting whatever dignity I had left. It was about making sure the life I'd lived didn't become a product for my children to sell. On the drive to Hall, the town looked ordinary, a place where nothing much ever happened, and where, sometimes, the quietest sins were the worst. The community center sat in the middle of town like a benign civic heart. The marquee read, in tasteful script, Celebration of Life, in loving memory of Frank Hargrove. The black letters looked obscene. We parked 2 blocks away. Eddie placed a small recorder in his jacket pocket. Mabel adjusted her hat. I tucked a lightweight camera into the inner pocket of my coat. We walked up like 3 ordinary people going to neighbor's memorial, not like hunters. Inside, the room smelled of coffee and cheap floor arrangements. Tables were set, napkins folded with the care of someone who practices choreography. People greeted one another with hugs and low, sympathetic voices. There were chairs reserved at the front with my name on them, the kind of thing you see at a funeral that's been planned for months. It was the strangest thing to be alive and moving through your own wake. Familiar faces, neighbors, old cards partners, church members, looked at me and nodded, unaware of the lie. I sat in the third row, the little recorder buzzing quietly in my lap, and listened as speeches began. Amanda's voice sounded practiced as she walked up to the microphone. She spoke about our dad's generous heart, about how he touched everyone, and how the family had been deeply grateful for any support. Her words were pristine, confident, and when she paused for tears, people leaned in to hand her tissues and write more checks. I felt bile rise in my throat. Mabel squeezed my hand under the program, a small anchor. Then something happened that I didn't expect. A woman I'd never seen before, a young volunteer with a clipboard, approached the donation table and whispered something to a woman collecting envelopes. The volunteer's shoulders jerked like someone who'd been surprised, and she glanced toward the doorway in the middle of a big, nervous move. Her eyes landed on me for half a second. Panic flashed across her face. She fumbled a stack of envelopes, and a few slipped and tumbled to the floor. I heard the soft crackle as an envelope opened, and for a heartbeat, as people bent to pick them up and murmur reassurances, I saw inside the fallen envelope a folded receipt and a small note in a hurried hand referencing an outside account, a pickup location, a name. Mabel's fingers into my palm tightened. Eddie, who had been pretending to look at the program, nudged me. He mouthed, "Envelope, now." I rose slowly, the room blurring at the edges like a dream that's very close to becoming a nightmare. I bent, picked up the envelope, and felt the heat of the paper against my fingers. For a moment, everyone's eyes were on me. Curiosity, pity, assumption. Amanda looked at me like she might shout, but what I did surprised them. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout. I simply walked over to the table where the donations were being tallied and handed the envelope to the woman collecting it with a small smile and a quiet voice. "Excuse me," I said. "I think this fell." She thanked me, flustered, and passed it along. Her hands trembled. She didn't realize the note inside would be our first real proof. No one noticed me slip the folded receipt into my pocket as I straightened. By the time the speech ended, and people were moving toward the reception line, Eddie had a camera full of people's faces and a recording of whispers. Mabel had spoken to a woman who handled the catering and learned the name of the driver who delivered the food, who, according to the woman, had been paid in cash. We left with our little treasures, photocopies, a receipt, a volunteer's name. It wasn't a smoking gun yet, but it was something, a thread to pull. Outside, as the hall filled with conversations and the first clink of plastic cutlery, I realized the look on Amanda's face had changed from casual grief to something sharper. Fear, maybe, or annoyance that the evening wasn't proceeding according to plan. We drove home in silence, our car a small bubble of conspiratorial air. The papers rustled between us. Eddie's camera battery glowed like a small war trophy. When we spread everything on Mabel's kitchen table later that evening, the pattern was clearer. Someone had forged a medical narrative. Someone had arranged catering and decor and a program. Someone had a plan for the money. And someone, likely more than one someone, had taken the practical steps to ensure it looked legitimate. It was messy and taut and fragile. It could be dismissed by a well-meaning neighbor as a family doing what they need to do. But layered together, the receipts, the notes, the volunteer's tremor, the envelope I'd pocketed, made a picture no one could look at and say innocent. And that's when, Mabel said, eyes cold and steady, we realized this wasn't just a bad idea. It was a plan. And plans, Eddie added, can be proven. And that's when the situation exploded. I said softly, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline and fear and something like righteous fury. The explosion didn't come the next day. It came that same night. After we left the community hall, Mabel insisted I stay at her place until things calmed enough to think straight, which was her delicate way of saying my house wasn't safe. I didn't argue. At my age, you learn when to ignore pride. Sometimes staying alive means sitting at a friend's kitchen table with trembling hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. We laid the evidence out again under Mabel's kitchen light. The forged medical statements, the the receipts, the volunteer's name, the audio clips Eddie captured, the folded slip I'd pocketed from the fallen donation envelope. It felt surreal, like staring at puzzle pieces that spelled out your murder. A knot had formed in my stomach, the kind that doesn't loosen even when you try to breathe. I didn't know what the children were capable of anymore. That was the part one couldn't wrap my head around. At around 9:40 p.m., as Mabel was putting a pot of soup on the stove, a faint rhythmic tapping echoed from her porch. She froze. I froze. Eddie's hand instinctively went to the pocket where he kept his old badge and a small flashlight. Mabel gave me a look that said, "Stay put." Then she cracked open the blinds. Her face hardened instantly. She turned back to us. "They're here." My heartbeat stumbled. They, not someone, not a visitor. They, my children, my blood, the same people who had stood in a hall earlier that evening and accepted donations for my funeral, now standing on Mabel's porch. The knock came again, louder this time. Impatient. Familiar. Eddie moved to the side window and peered out. 3 of them. He said quietly, "Your daughter, your son, and someone else, the man I don't know." Mabel snapped off the stove and turned off the kitchen lights. "They don't need to know you're here. Don't say a word unless I tell you. They smell fear like foxes." The boldness in her voice would have made me laugh on a better day. But tonight was not that day. I sat still, staring toward the hallway as shadows moved beyond the frosted glass of the front door. Another knock, this one sharper. Then Brian's voice. "We know you're in there. Mom Dunbar. Open up." Mom Dunbar. They were using her nickname, the one they only used when they wanted something. Mabel's jaw set. She walked toward the door and cracked it open, holding the chain tight. "What is all this ruckus?" "It's near 10. Emma stepped into view, her face blotchy, eyes red, but not from grief. Panic, rage, something twisted between. "Mrs. Dunbar," she said with trembling voice, "is my dad here?" My stomach dropped. I saw Eddie tense in the corner. Mabel didn't blink. "Why? What makes you think that?" Brian shoved forward. "We saw his car. He came here after the event. We saw someone who looked like him leaving the parking lot." Mabel narrowed her eyes. "Lots of old men drive Buicks." "That car is his," Emma snapped. "Where is he?" Mabel let out an annoyed sigh, the kind an old woman gives to a nosy teenager. "You children need to stop raising your voices at people's porches. He isn't here." "Yes," Brian growled. "And we need to talk to him. Now." "No," Mabel said, calm and cold as winter. "You don't." The man I didn't recognize stepped forward then, a younger fellow, maybe mid-30s, wearing a polo shirt with the logo of the community center. His jaw was tight, his posture stiff, like someone who'd been dragged into something he didn't fully understand. He lifted a clipboard. "Ma'am, I just want to confirm something. Were you at the event tonight?" Mabel nodded stiffly. "Of course I was. I'm practically an institution there." He cleared his throat. "Did you notice anything unusual? Anything concerning about the donations? We've had," he glanced at Brian and Emma nervously, "some complaints." Complaints. That word chilled me. From who? About what? The only complaints possible were from people who knew something wasn't right. Brian stepped in sharply. "Look, my father is vulnerable. He's confused. He hasn't been well. We need to bring him home before he gets manipulated or hits his head somewhere." Hits his head. The phrasing stuck under my ribs like a thorn. I could see where this was heading. They had a narrative ready. A neat little story. Old man. Confused. Declining. Easily influenced. Needs guardianship. Needs protection. That folder of legal documents flashed through my mind. Guardianship. Competency statements. Forged medical conditions. They weren't just killing me off online. They were preparing to strip me legally. The social worker continued hesitantly. "If there's a chance he's confused, we may need to file a wellness check." Mabel's voice cut through him like a blade. "He's not here. And let me tell you one thing. Frank hasn't been confused a single day I've known him. His mind is sharper than every politician in this state. If he's not answering your calls, it's because he doesn't want to. Emma's jaw dropped. Mrs. Dunbar. You children, Mabel said, ought to be ashamed. Crowing up and down the street like roosters. What in heaven's name are you doing? Chasing your father around like bounty hunters. We're trying to help him. Emma snapped. He's been acting unpredictable. Unpredictable. Another legal keyword. Guardianship petitions are full of them. Brian leaned closer to the door, eyes dark. Ma'am, he stole something from the donation table tonight. My breath froze. What? What were they talking about? Then it hit me. The envelope. The volunteer dropped the donation envelope. I picked it up. There were two things inside. A receipt and a handwritten note I'd slipped into my coat pocket. They must have noticed. Or the volunteer panicked. Or someone saw the tremor in her hands. Mabel's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation. Emma spoke quickly, voice cracking but rehearsed. There was a confidential note inside. Something only the family should see. He took it. The lie clicked into place. They weren't here to confront me. They were here to retrieve the evidence. The man from the community center looked overwhelmed. Mrs. Dunbar, if your neighbor is experiencing cognitive confusion, the family has a right to... Mabel cut him off. You can leave right now. All of you. We're not leaving without our dad, Emma said, her voice breaking. He's not your possession, Mabel said. Brian's voice darkened. If he's not here, then you won't mind us checking around. That, Mabel said sharply, is trespassing. The air felt like it might split in half. I could see all of them to the crack in the door. My children standing there, breathing hard, eyes frantic, masking desperation under full concern. They didn't look like a family looking for their father. They looked like cornered animals. Brian finally stepped back and muttered to the social worker, "Fine, we'll call the sheriff. Say he's missing and confused. They'll search every house on the street until they find him." A chill ran down my arms. If the sheriff got involved, the guardianship paperwork would follow. They'd paint me as unstable. They'd bring me in. They'd take control. I would lose everything. My home, my bank accounts, my future, my freedom. Mabel must have sensed the panic rising inside me, because she slammed the door shut, clicked the locks, and barked, "Eddie!" Back room. Eddie grabbed the evidence. I ducked behind a hallway arch as Mabel closed curtains and flicked off lights. Outside, voices grew louder. Footsteps. Shuffling. A car door slammed. Mabel's voice was low and fierce. "They're not giving up. They're escalating. They're scared of what you found. That means we hit the right thread." I swallowed hard. What do we do now? Eddie turned to me, expression grave but focused. "This isn't just personal anymore," he said. "This was planned." Mabel nodded. "And people who plan things as carefully don't stop. Not until someone stops them." I exhaled shakily, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. The party, the fundraiser, the forged papers, now the escalation, the chase, the accusations. This was no longer a scam. It was a full-blown operation, a dark one, and I was now in the middle of it, without a single person in my own family on my side. My voice came out quiet, rough, older than I'd ever heard it. What do we do next? Mabel looked at me with steely eyes. "We fight," she said. "We uncover the rest." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unfamiliar rising inside my chest. Not fear, not grief, resolve. Something had been set in motion far bigger than a fake funeral. And the deeper we went, the darker it was going to get. Sleep didn't come that night. Not for me. Not for Mabel. Not for Eddie. The house was dark and quiet, but the kind of quiet that doesn't bring rest. Only the slow, crawling awareness that something is closing in from beyond the walls. I lay on Mabel's old floral couch, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles overhead, replaying the voices on the porch. My daughter's panicked insistence. My son's anger. The threat of calling the sheriff. The social worker's hesitation. The mention of cognitive confusion. They were building a narrative in real time. A confused old man, a father in decline, a vulnerable adult, a danger to himself, someone needing guardianship, someone needing decisions made for him. They weren't just preparing to steal money. They were preparing to steal me. I didn't know how long I stared at the ceiling before a dim shape appeared in the doorway. Mabel, with her hair pinned back and her housecoat tied tighter than usual. "You awake?" she whispered. Hard not to be. She nodded. "Come on, we're not done." Eddie was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, paper spread across the table like a battlefield map. He had the kind of restless energy that comes from hunting something that finally left a trail. "We follow the money," he said, tapping a receipt. "Always follow the money." He laid out the pieces. The GoFundMe had hit over $12,000 by midnight. The organizer's email was new, created within the last 2 weeks. The linked bank account wasn't a personal one. It was a joint business account under a vague name, Carter and Hargrove Services. Hargrove, my last name. They'd used my identity to open an account. My stomach tightened. Eddie slid a printed sheet toward me. "This is a transfer log from the GoFundMe withdrawal policy. They can move funds every 24 hours. If they withdrew any time today, it would have gone straight to this business account. And we need to know who owns it," Mabel added. We dug deeper. Eddie knew how to navigate public databases the way a sailor knows the stars. He looked through filings, tax records, account holders, anything that might tie the business to a name. Then he paused, found something. He turned the laptop toward us. My heart dropped. The business account was set up by Brian, my son, and someone named Eric Carter. That explains the man on the porch. I muttered. Mabel leaned closer. "Why involve an outsider?" "To keep fingerprints off it," Eddie said. "If your kids are smart enough to plan a whole fundraiser, they're smart enough to hide the money trail under a partner's name." It stung. Not just a betrayal, but the realization they'd put that much thought into it. Eddie kept working. "We need statements. Witnesses. Someone who saw something at the event. Someone who heard something." Mabel's eyes lit up. "The volunteer, the girl with the clipboard. She was scared when she saw you. She was right. That girl's reaction at the hall had been too sharp, too fast. She knew something, maybe more than she meant to." We found her name from the slip of paper I'd pocketed. Emily Reyes. Mabel knew her aunt. Small towns work like spiderwebs. Everyone is connected if you know where to look. By morning, we were sitting at Emily's aunt's kitchen table, sipping awful instant coffee, while Emily sat stiff as a board, eyes red-rimmed from stress or sleep deprivation. "I didn't want to be part of this," she whispered, hands trembling. "I just signed up to help with events for college credit." "What did they tell you?" Eddie asked gently. She swallowed. "Hard. They said your family was struggling, that they needed help organizing a memorial. But then things felt wrong." "Wrong how?" Mabel pressed. Emily twisted her fingers together. "They were rehearsing. Like, literally rehearsing lines about how sick you were. What you said in your final week. How brave you'd been." My stomach churned. "They had a script," she said. "Printed. Your son went over it with your daughter. They argued about whether to make your death sound peaceful or dramatic." I felt dizzy. "Did you see money being moved?" Eddie asked. She nodded. "Brian had a lockbox. He told me not to touch it, not to open it. He said the donations needed to be counted privately. Where is it now?" I asked. She hesitated. "They took it with them when they left the hall last night." Eddie sighed. "Figures." Then Emily lowered her voice. "Mrs. Dunbar, when he realized Mr. Hargrove walked into the event, she looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. Brian turned white. He told Eric, 'This ruins everything.' Then he said, 'We need to get the papers filed before he talks to anyone.'" Heat flooded my face. The papers. Guardianship. They were accelerating. "What papers?" Mabel asked, though we knew. "The competency petition," Emily whispered. "They said you were unstable, that you've been wandering the neighborhood confused." "I haven't," I said, anger rising in my chest like fire. "I know," Emily said quickly. "That's why I'm talking to you." I didn't sign up to fake someone's death. I exhaled shakily. Thank you. You've done more for me than my own children. She lowered her head. I'm sorry. We left with newfound direction and a witness. But we needed more. Harder proof. Something undeniable. Eddie said, we need the bank. If the account is real, the withdrawals leave fingerprints. But banks don't hand over records easily. You need someone inside, Mabel said. She leaned back in her chair and gave a slow smile. Lucky for you, I know someone. Turns out, Mabel's cousin works as a bank compliance officer. 40 years in the business. The kind of woman who can sniff out a fraudulent account from a mile away. When we met her after hours behind the bank near the employee parking lot, she took one look at the documents Eddie showed her and let out a sharp hiss through her teeth. This is fraud, she said immediately. And whoever opened this account used someone else's personal information to get approved. The paperwork doesn't match. The signatures don't match. Can you tell us who authorized the withdrawals? Eddie asked. I can't tell you, she said, but I can tell the police. My breath trembled. Would you? She nodded firmly. If half of what you're saying is true, they're in deep trouble. I'll report it first thing tomorrow. You'll need to be ready. Ready for what? I asked. Oh, sweetheart, she said, patting my shoulder. When you report fraud this big, everyone involved panics. And desperate people do reckless things. A heavy chill crawled through my chest. That night, back at Mabel's, we laid the pieces out one more time. Emily's testimony, photos of the flyers, the forged guardianship papers, the catering receipts, the donation envelope, the bank's confirmation, the fundraiser logs, Eddie's recordings. Each piece sharpened the picture. They hadn't just lied about my death. They hadn't just wanted sympathy money. They were building a full structure to take control of my life, my accounts, my home, my decisions, my future. They wanted me legally erased. By the end of the night, our kitchen table looked like evidence from a documentary about financial exploitation of the elderly. Mabel leaned back, folding her arms. We have enough now. For what? I whispered. To take this public. To go to the authorities. To confront them legally. I shook my head. No, I said. Not yet. Both of them stared at me. Eddie frowned. Frank, we have everything. And they still think I'm confused, I said. They still think they can twist this. They still think they control the story. Mabel narrowed her eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying, I murmured, feeling a heat rise in my chest I hadn't felt in years, that none of this matters until I walk into a room they think they own and take back everything with my own voice. Mabel's eyebrows lifted slowly. Oh, she whispered, a smile curling. You mean? Yes, I said. Eddie let out a low whistle. This is going to be messy. Good, I said. They built this whole nightmare on a lie. It's time I show them what the truth looks like. I gathered the papers, the receipts, the recordings, the witness statements. But nothing, I said quietly, prepared me for what I discovered next. And it was true, because the next morning, when the bank official filed her fraud report, the sheriff's department pulled up to my house, not to arrest my children, but to serve me with papers, guardianship papers, filed by my son, marked urgent, emergency petition, signed, processed, stamped, approved for hearing. And suddenly, this wasn't just a scam anymore. It was a war. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up to my driveway just after sunrise, its red-blue lights flickering silently across the windows of my empty house, like a warning shot fired before dawn. Mabel saw it first. She'd been peeking through her curtain since 5 a.m, pacing like a dog that smells a storm coming. Frank, she hissed from the door, it's happening. My stomach twisted. We'd stayed up half the night preparing binders, printing screenshots, organizing receipts, and recorded testimony. But we weren't ready for this. Not this fast. 2 deputies stepped out. Deputy Hodge, a man built like a refrigerator with a uniform 2 sizes too tight, and a younger woman I didn't recognize. Both looked grim, professional, and exhausted. The expression officers were when they know they're walking into family trouble. I wasn't at the house. Thank God. If I'd been asleep in my bed, alone, unaware, they might have hauled me out of my pajamas before I had a chance to blink. Mabel gripped my arm. They're going to search the house. The younger deputy knocked. Mr. Hargrove, sheriff's office. They didn't know I wasn't home. Then Deputy Hodge unfolded a piece of paper and read loudly, "We're here with an emergency guardianship petition filed by your son, requesting immediate welfare check and removal to protective custody." Protective custody. Those words hit me like a cold slap across the face. At 74, being placed in protective custody usually means one thing. You don't leave under your own power. Mabel muttered, "Those rotten cowards." The younger deputy tried the door. It was locked. She sighed. "We might need to force entry if—" My heart lurched. "No," I said sharply, stepping back from the window. "I'm not watching them break into my home." "You won't," Mabel said, guiding me to her kitchen table. "Sit. Breathe. Eddie's already on his way." I lowered myself into the chair, hands trembling, ears ringing. The thought of strangers armed with authority, walking through my rooms, rummaging through my belongings, deciding whether I was competent or not, was suffocating. I didn't realize tears had blurred my vision until Mabel brushed one off my cheek with her thumb. "You're not alone," she said. "Not today. Not for this." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I was drowning in paperwork I didn't sign and lies I didn't tell. Eddie burst into the kitchen minutes later, out of breath, a messenger bag slung across his shoulder. "They filed it," he said, voice tight. "And they filed it dirty." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I knew. He dropped the bag on the table and pulled out copies of the guardianship petition. "They marked you as mentally declining, prone to wandering, unable to manage finances, neglecting medical care." His jaw tightened. Every red flag required for emergency approval. My hands shook. "I haven't wandered anywhere except my backyard." "They forged medical notes," Eddie said. "Statements from non-existent doctors. Fake call logs claiming you missed appointments that never existed." My breath went cold. "And," he added, "they included 2 signed statements from family witnesses claiming you've been confused, hostile, and paranoid." I leaned back, dizzy. "Who signed them?" Eddie hesitated. "Your son and your daughter." The room tilted. I put my face in my hands and let out a sound I haven't made since my wife died, a low, broken thing. Mabel put her hand on my shoulder. "Let it out." I didn't mean to cry. I didn't want to. Men my age don't cry. We break quietly and patch ourselves with duct tape and hope no one notices. But this hurt in a way duct tape couldn't fix. Eddie cleared his throat. "It gets worse." Mabel shot him a glare. "Eddie? No. He needs to hear it." I wiped my eyes. "Tell me." "The guardianship hearing is tomorrow." My head snapped up. "Tomorrow?" "They rushed it," Eddie said. "They told the court you were a danger to yourself, and that waiting even a few days would put you at risk." "I'm not a danger," I whispered. Mabel squeezed my hand. "We know that." Eddie continued. "Your children requested full control of your medical decisions, your bank accounts, your property, and your living situation." My breath hitched. "Living situation?" "They want you in a facility," Eddie said softly. "A memory care home. One of those places where they take your shoelaces and lock the doors at night." My heart hammered. My palms went clammy. I felt the air leave my lungs. I wasn't dying. I wasn't incompetent. I wasn't confused. But they had declared all of that on paper. And paper, in the eyes of a rushed judge, often speaks louder than truth. Mabel stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "We fight," she said fiercely. "We bring the recordings, the witness, the bank report, the receipts, the fundraiser logs, everything." Eddie nodded. "We need to organize everything tonight. We'll present tomorrow." I swallowed. "And if the judge believes them?" Eddie hesitated, then told me the truth. "If the judge believes them, Frank, you won't be going home again." My chest tightened. My vision swam. Mabel knelt by my chair and grabbed my hands. "Listen to me. Look at me." I forced my gaze to meet hers. "We are going to fight this. she said, but you need to stay strong. Your children are not acting out of love. They are acting out of desperation. And desperation makes people reckless. Reckless. That word made me uneasy. What do you mean? I whispered. She glanced toward the window. If they see the guardianship is slipping through their fingers, they might try something else. My heart lurched. Like what? Eddie answered softly, like trying to intercept you before the hearing. A chill washed over me. You think they'd? Yes, Eddie said. You embarrassed them yesterday at the event. You took evidence. They know you're hiding with someone. You're a threat now. They're cornered. And cornered animals bite the hardest, Mabel finished. I ran both hands over my face, feeling older than I ever had. What do we do? We go dark, Eddie said. No posting. No calling them. No answering the phone. No going outside alone. And you, Mabel said, turning to Eddie, stay the night. If the kids come back, we need someone here who knows how to handle them. I already planned to, Eddie said. The night felt long, like we were waiting for something we couldn't see, but could feel. At around 10 p.m., the phone rang. Mabel grabbed it first. Hello? A pause. Then I heard Emma's voice through the receiver. Cold, sharp, brittle. Put my dad on the phone. Mabel didn't move. He's resting. No, he's not, Emma snapped. The sheriff didn't find him there. We know you're hiding him. Mabel said nothing. Tell him we're filing a missing person report. And tell him the judge tomorrow will hear every detail of why he shouldn't be living alone. Mabel hung up. We all sat in silence. My stomach churned. My hands shook. My heart thudded with fear and fury and something deeper, a sense of utter betrayal. Then, as if the night wanted to make itself clear, headlights flashed across Mabel's living room window. Not slow, not casual, fast, like someone pulling up with intent. Mabel turned off every light. We watched through the curtains as Brian's SUV rolled slowly down the street. The engine idled, then drifted past, then looped back. Again, a patrol, a search. Eddie whispered, They're looking for you. I felt a cold wave pass through me. They'll keep searching, Eddie said. But that's good. Desperation means they'll slip, and we need them to slip. Mabel nodded. They'll reveal something. A lie, a threat, a mistake. I swallowed hard. But what if they don't? Oh, honey, she said with a sad smile. People who build lies as big never keep them standing. We spent the rest of the night gathering everything. Photos, receipts, audio, witness statements, the bank findings. We built a binder thicker than a phone book. Eddie even drafted an affidavit for Emily to sign in the morning if she agreed. By sunrise, the sky turning pale gold, I felt a gnawing in my gut. Something was wrong. Not just with what they'd done, but with why they were doing it. There was something we still hadn't uncovered. Something darker, bigger, deeper. And that morning, as we prepared for the hearing, Eddie's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his face drained. What is it? Mabel asked. He turned to me, eyes wide. Frank, the bank fraud officer called. She reported the account. And I whispered, and your daughter and son withdrew the entire fundraiser balance at 5 a.m. I blinked. How much? He swallowed. $38,000. My stomach dropped. I felt my breath catch in my chest. They cleaned it out, Eddie said. Every penny. Mabel grabbed the back of a chair. But why so fast? The hearings today. Why would they? Her voice faded. I felt at first a cold, sinking dread in my stomach. Eddie realized it a second later, eyes wide. Oh, God, he whispered. What? I demanded. He stared at me like he didn't know how to say it. Frank, they emptied the account because they don't plan to show up at the hearing. My pulse pounded. Then what? They're going to disappear, Eddie said. With the money, with the lies, with everything. And if they vanish before the judge sees the real paperwork. My voice cracked. I lose anyway. Eddie nodded. And that, he said quietly, is when everything finally snapped. Everything snapped at once. Inside me, Inside Mabel's kitchen, inside the fragile structure of lies my children had built. It didn't happen like a movie moment with heroic music. It happened like a quiet, brutal breaking deep in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I wasn't even fighting for dignity. I was fighting for my life, my legal life, my freedom, my ability to wake up in my own bed and decide my own morning. And now they were running. By 8:20 a.m., Eddie had spoken to the bank fraud officer again. She told us the withdrawals were done in person, at an ATM first, then a teller window, 2 signatures, 2 IDs used. One was my son's. The other belonged to Eric Carter, the outsider. They're cleaning house, Eddie muttered. And once a scammer starts cleaning, they're not stopping until they're too far away to catch. I stare at the kitchen table, at the evidence spread across it like a battlefield. All right, I said. Mabel squeezed my shoulder. All right, what? We end this today, I said quietly. Not tomorrow. Not in court. Today. Eddie stared at me. Frank, what are you planning? I pulled the event flyer toward me. The celebration of life for Frank Hargrove, printed 2 weeks before anyone announced my death. They think they own the narrative, I said. They think they control where I can go and how the world sees me. They think I'm going to hide. I'm not hiding anymore. Eddie raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you want to end this today? I looked both of them in the eyes. I want my children to see me alive, I said, in front of every single person who believed their lie. Silence filled the room. Not fear, not doubt, a silence of understanding. You want a crowd, Mabel said softly. Witnesses. You want truth exposed publicly, Eddie added. I nodded once. I want them to face what they built, and I want the whole town to hear it. Mabel smiled slowly. That, she said, I can work with. The setup. We arrived at the courthouse just after 9 a.m. The hallway was full. Attorneys, families, social workers, locals waiting for civil hearings. The perfect audience. The clerk at the front desk recognized my name and stiffened. Mr. Hargrove, you're supposed to be brought in by family petition. I brought myself, I said, handing her my ID. She blinked twice, then whispered something to a woman beside her. Papers rustled. Whisper spread. Heads turned. Good. Let them look. Within minutes, the guardianship judge's assistant approached, face pale. Mr. Hargrove, your children called earlier. They said you were missing. I'm right here, I said. And they aren't here yet. Her voice trembled. We haven't been able to reach them. Eddie leaned in. They will show up, he said. They always do. Lies don't walk straight, but they walk loud. We waited in the hallway. Standing together, me, Eddie, and Mabel, like an unlikely little army of old bones and stubborn hearts. People whispered. Some recognized me from the memorial announcements. Some looked confused, others shocked. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. Then the doors swung open so hard they clapped against the wall. My son and daughter rushed inside. Emma looked frantic, hair unbrushed, eyes bloodshot. Brian looked furious, jaw clenched tight. Both froze the moment they saw me standing in the center of the hallway, alive, upright, eyes locked on theirs. Emma gasped. Dad? Brian took a step back like he'd seen a ghost. Surprised to see me? I asked. His voice came out strangled. How? You weren't supposed to. You tried to file guardianship papers. I said loudly, so every person in that hallway could hear. You tried to strip me of my home. You forged medical statements. You took nearly $40,000 from people who thought I was dead. Heads turned. Whispers surged. Emma's face crumpled. Dad, no. It's not like that. Then tell them what it is like. Mabel said sharply, stepping forward. My son's eyes darted around the room. Dad, can we just talk somewhere private? No, I said firmly. We talk right here. The judge's assistant emerged from the courtroom door, breathless. We can begin your case now. All parties, please enter. We stepped inside the courtroom, me, my children, Mabel, Eddie, and half the hallway behind us, because no one wanted to miss what was about to unfold. The showdown. The judge was an older woman with steel gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it could have held up the whole roof. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at the file, and said, "Mr. Hargrove, your petition states you are mentally declining and unable to manage your affairs." I stepped forward. "Your Honor, I filed nothing. My children filed that petition." The judge's eyebrows lifted. "Your children?" Emma swallowed. "Your Honor," he's confused. "He wandered away from home. We've been worried." "Confused?" I said, turning to the judge. "Your Honor, I'll let you decide." I placed a binder of evidence on the witness table with a heavy thud. "Inside this binder," I said, "is proof that my children declare me dead on the internet. Proof they forged medical documents. Proof they created a business account under my name to steal donations. Proof they organized a fundraiser for my funeral while I was sitting alive in my living room." The judge blinked once, then twice. "Is this true?" "We were helping." Brian blurted. "He doesn't understand." Eddie stood. "I'm a retired postal inspector. I reviewed every document. The forgeries are clear. The guardianship petition is fraudulent, and the fundraiser is under active bank investigation." The judge's face changed. It hardened. "Ms. Hargrove," she said slowly, turning her gaze to Emma. "Mr. Hargrove, stand up." They rose, trembling. The judge flipped through the binder. When she reached the printed obituary, she slammed the file shut. "This is disgusting," she said, "and criminal." Emma burst into sobs. We were desperate. Dad wasn't helping us anymore. We thought if he was gone, we could. Brian grabbed her arm sharply. "Shut up, Emma." "Sit down," the judge barked. "Both of you." They collapsed into their seats. The judge took a breath, then addressed the room. "Let the record show. The emergency guardianship petition is formally denied. The petitioners have engaged in fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse of an elderly individual." My chest swelled, not with pride, with relief, so heavy my ribs felt like they could break from it. Then the judge turned to my children. "As of this moment, a protective order is issued preventing either of you from approaching or contacting Mr. Hargrove." Emma sobbed harder. Brian stared at the floor, jaw working like he was chewing glass. And further, the judge continued, "This court recommends that the sheriff's department and district attorney open a criminal investigation into the fraudulent fundraiser and forged documents." The room gasped. My knees trembled. Mabel grabbed my arm to steady me. The judge looked directly at me then, voice softening. "Mr. Hargrove, you're free to go home." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." And just like that, it was finally over. Or so I thought. Because as we turned to leave the courtroom, my son muttered something under his breath. Low, bitter, venomous. "This isn't over, old man." But he was wrong. It was over. For him. The courthouse doors swung shut behind us with a heavy echo that felt like the universe finally exhaling. For the first time in days, maybe years, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not joy, not victory, just release. Like someone had been holding a fist around my ribs and finally let go. The sunlight outside felt warmer than it should have. Softer. Real. Mabel slipped her hand through my arm like we were old dance partners. "Well," she said, "you survived being killed off by your own children. That's something." I let out a shaky laugh. Didn't think I'd have to add that to my life story. Eddie slapped my back, gently, because I'm not as sturdy as I used to be. "That courtroom," he said, "is going to be talked about for years." We walked together down the courthouse steps, past people who'd watched the whole showdown unfold. Neighbors, church folks, strangers who'd read my obituary 48 hours earlier. Some nodded at me with quiet sympathy. Others touched my shoulder. A few apologized for donating to the fundraiser. One old fella said, "You're tougher than you look, Frank." Maybe I was. We didn't go straight home. Not yet. I wasn't ready to sit in that quiet house with the knowledge of what my own children had tried to do. Not ready to face the recliner, where I'd first read my online death announcement. Not ready to feel the weight of what betrayal does to an old man's heart. So we went to Mabel's, her idea, not mine, and she made a big pot of chicken noodle soup the old-fashioned way, thick and steaming and healing. I sat at her table, spoon in hand, staring at the steam rising like little ghosts. "Hurts, doesn't it?" she said softly. I nodded. "It's like losing them twice." "You didn't lose them," she said. "They lost themselves." I didn't answer. Grief is a strange companion, especially when the people you're grieving are still alive. My hand shook a little as I lifted the spoon. I wasn't shaking from fear anymore. I think it was the weight of everything ending all at once. Eddie brought in the last binder of evidence and set it on the table. "DA's office will take it from here," he said. "You don't have to lift another finger." I nodded, relieved. Then he added, "But you have to promise me one thing." "What?" "Never let anyone convince you you're finished," he said. "Old doesn't mean done." I swallowed. Hard. Mabel chimed in with her usual fire. "And if your children ever try anything stupid again, you tell me. I'll chase them down the street with a broom." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time since this nightmare began. We spent the rest of the afternoon quietly putting things back where they belonged. I finally went home, accompanied by both of them, because neither trusted the situation yet. My mailbox was stuffed with sympathy cards people had dropped off the day before. I didn't open a single one. Inside my house, everything was still where I'd left it. The air smelled like lemon furniture polish and old books. My recliner waited by the window, the blanket folded neatly over the back. I lowered myself into it slowly, feeling the familiar creak of springs beneath me. Alive. Home. Free. And this time, the quiet wasn't oppressive. It was mine. Later that night, as I sat under my old lamp with a cup of tea, I allowed myself the truth. I didn't just survive what my children did. I outlived a version of myself that would have let it slide. I grew a spine thicker than the lies they built. I grew friends stronger than the family that betrayed me. And I grew a new understanding. Age doesn't make you weak. Being alone doesn't make you powerless. Sometimes it makes you unstoppable. I'm still healing, slowly, one breath at a time. Trust takes longer to rebuild when the people who broke it share your blood. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not of growing old. Not of living alone. And certainly not of standing up when someone tries to bury me before my time. I'm still here. Still living. Still loud enough to be heard. And if you're still listening, what would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you want more stories like this, thank you for listening. Tap subscribe.